When I think about Easter, I mainly think about Easter morning and Easter eggs. I remember having Easter eggs myself, and I remember my small kids as well, or rather my kids when they were small, going on Easter egg hunts. And it was that real feeling that finally, after having resisted things for 40 days and 40 nights, or the 46 days of Lent, finally we could binge on chocolate or binge on sweets or something that we'd given up and been really good about. All of a sudden now this was the time that we could go back and make up for that abstinence that we had. This Lent I have looked at not giving things up, but trying to make more of the things that I've had, so that my need for other things was less. And when I've been thinking about this, I've looked at things slightly differently, and I'd like to share with you 3 stories from the Lent that I've just had. The first is about a guy called Lally. Lally didn't have much. I think he's apparently a mortgage broker from Wales, not very famous except for very recently, but he wanted to help a couple of charities, and all he had was really himself and 2 strong legs. And so what he decided to do was climb the local mountain. But he didn't just climb his local mountain, which was a proper mountain in South Wales called Pen Fan. He wanted to raise £50,000. So he didn't just climb it once. He didn't just climb it once a day for a week or for a month. He climbed it nearly every day for a year. Some days it was just so snowy out there or so windy that he couldn't go. So on other days he had to climb the same mountain 3 times in a day. But his inspiration for that was that he really wanted to raise £50,000, which he ended up doing. And so with very little, in fact nothing other than himself, he raised a huge amount of money because he wanted to do some good work. Second story. I was at a cafe a few weeks ago with one of my daughters, and we sat there in the window of the cafe eating our lunch. And as I looked out of the window, I saw a young family, a mum sort of pushchair, which was empty, and 2 young boys walking past the cafe. And the boys were very young. I reckon one was probably 18 months and the other one might have been 3. And the older one, the 3-year-old, walked along and saw this puddle. And as he went past the cafe window, he stamped in the puddle. And his younger brother saw him do that and thought that looked brilliant, so he stamped in the puddle as well, and off they went out of sight. And I didn't think much of it until a few moments later the older boy came back again the other way, and he jumped in the puddle, and then his younger brother came behind him and jumped in the puddle, and they had so much fun that they turned round and they did it again, and off they went again out of sight. And it made me smile quite a bit because they were having so much joy. A few moments later, there he was back again in that puddle, jumping that puddle, and his brother jumped as well, and the joy on their face was just absolutely fantastic. And that's a really nice story of 2 boys having a nice time in a puddle. But the interesting thing I think about this story was that this was the puddle that they jumped in. I went and took a picture of it afterwards. It was a tiny puddle. The puddle was literally that big. But it wasn't about the size of the puddle that contributed to their joy. It was about their ability to get the real sense of joy that they had doing that together as 2 young boys. Was just beautiful to watch. So the third and last story is about a lady called Jacinda Arden, and some of you may have heard of Jacinda Arden. Her job was being Prime Minister of New Zealand, and she is a very powerful politician in New Zealand, and she has at her command millions and millions of New Zealand dollars to do all sorts of things for the country. And you'll be aware that there was a attack at a mosque in New Zealand where 50 people were killed by a gunman, and a horrendous tragedy for the company. And what Jacinda Arden did right in the aftermath of that was not use her huge importance, not use her huge resources, not use her massive office of Prime Minister to make anything feel better for the people involved in that. She laid all of that down and she went and saw the people that had been affected and did this. She embraced them, she comforted them. And I think this photo is an amazing picture of what it means to give of your own humanity. However important Jacinda Arden was, that's not what she came and gave to those people who needed her comfort. She simply gave that hug. So when it comes to Easter morning, instead of trying to make up for all the lost Easter eggs, all the lost chocolate, I'm going to just try and continue to see more of God's goodness in what I have, rather than seeking more, just trying to do more with what God has given me. And remembering that if we're trying to do things in God's name, He will always give us what we need.